Welcome to It's an Inside Job, the podcast where we equip you with actionable skills to build resilience, enhance communication, foster well-being, and lead and coach with impact. I'm your host, Jason Lim, and every Monday we bring you expert insights and real-world stories to help you thrive and succeed. And with that said, let's slip into the stream. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm thankful that you could show up for another Monday episode. Well, if you are a leader, if you are an HR person, if you are responsible for people, well, I think this episode is right down your alley. So today's episode, we feature an insightful conversation with Vindou Duc. She is a seasoned leader with over 25 years of global experience spanning marketing, human resources, and business transformation. Now, Vindou's passion lies in placing the human factor at the heart of organizations, helping leaders bring their authentic selves to their teams while creating safe, empowering space for growth. In other words, creating an environment for resilience. Now, in this episode, Vindou is going to share some practical strategies and key lessons that include how to navigate self-doubt as a leader, especially if you're new to the role or you're adjusting to cultural differences. The critical role of team dynamics and how understanding individual values can strengthen collaboration and cooperation. Also, why embedding active listening and feedback into your team's culture can transform communication and trust. And I think a key thing for a lot of people is ways to tackle the unique challenges of managing virtual teams and try to maintain cohesion across time zones. And I think that is a challenge for a lot of remote teams, a lot of remote leaders. So whether you're looking to strengthen your leadership skills or enhance improved workplace communication, the collaboration, well, I think this episode is for you because it's packed with actionable insights. So without further ado, let's slip into the stream with the first half of my conversation with Vindou Duc. Vindou, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you for having me.
I was wondering if we could kick off by you introducing briefly who you are and what you'd like to focus on today.
The introduction is always an interesting one for me. I'm one of those people who's got a very broad and diverse background. So originally Indian/Pakistani. I'm born in Africa, and today I live in Switzerland for the last 30 plus years. So home is where my family is. It's not a country. What do I do? Actually, having done my career in started my career in marketing and then in people and culture, as we call it today, I'm really one of those people who's very passionate about people, who believes that people is at the core of the business. And it's all about leadership, because leadership is not only at the senior levels, also throughout the organization. So having my own consultancy, I really work with growing people that I know will impact the business. It's not, often we talk of the business and say people who follow the business, but actually it's a two-way stream for me. One doesn't go without the other, but we have to look at it from the two angles.
I agree. It's vicarious. I mean, people need the business to grow and the business needs the people. So it is a vicarious relationship. Yeah. When it comes, you've spoken a lot on team dynamics, the importance of communication and collaboration and such. Perhaps we could start there, talking about sort of the importance, the connections between people that make up an organization, a firm, a company. I mean, what is your take on team dynamics?
So my take on team dynamics, the reason I'm focusing on team dynamics is because not only with my own experience, but observing what's been going on through the feedback of my network and my clients, I've observed that we focus a lot on the individual and we forget that actually teams, we all work in teams, whatever kind of teams. You work in teams, I work in teams. We always are working in teams. And the importance of the team dynamics, that the team understands each other, is underestimated. So what we call team dynamics, we can call it team cohesion, to say, are we talking the same language? We may be speaking English, but are we meaning the same thing with using the same words? I'm not always convinced. And so it's really creating the gel that environment where the team members, actually, to be more specific, are really being able to bring the authenticity and be comfortable. So forget even the word authenticity. It's just about being themselves, being in a safe space to be themselves and to really be able to speak up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think authenticity is a definite value that all teams need to bring on board, but it's sometimes quite hard, especially when you have diverse cultures. They could be business cultures, they could be departmental cultures, they could be culturals from sort of national cultures and such. And when you bring a group of people together, a lot of us can speak a good game about, if we use the vernacular of, psychological safety and vulnerability and equanimity or what have you. And inclusion is also a very common and overused word. I mean, the resilience of any company, it comes down to how well a team or a group of people can communicate with each other, meaning both the sort of the social aspect of it, but it's also the hard, difficult conversations. And time again, I always hear, people have the best intentions, but sometimes when it comes down to the nuts and bolts, when it is in an emotional, intense meeting and it's in the here and now, a lot of that can go to the wayside. And what happens in a lot of dynamics is that if we get into an argument, I sometimes, in sort of a postscript after I'm working with clients, a lot of the times the other person thinks they have bad intentions. They're out to get me, right? They may not say this per se, but that's what's going on in the background, the narrative in their head. How do we get beyond that? If we had to actually talk the nuts and bolts and the reality of team dynamics and communication and authenticity, from your experience, how do we get past this? And so it's not just a theoretical exercise.
I love your question. It's team dynamics, or team dynamics is like working in an organization is like getting in a marriage.
Okay.
Before you get married, you get to know each other. You get to spend time together. You get to know each other's values. You get to what you like, you don't like, what clicks, what doesn't click. But when you're coming to an organization and joining a team, how many times do you see that happening? How many times do you see the teams taking time to get to know each other? Now, don't get me wrong, they do team building. Team building is a part of the process, but it does not always hit the core. And you see, and that's, for me, that's where I have seen efficient teams being successful when they're taking the time to build the foundations. Of saying, okay, let's understand each other. Who are we? What's our likes and dislikes? And what is our code of conduct? So, meaning the company will have their values. You mentioned culture. The company will have their own culture. I call culture in a company a spider web because you have the core culture, but then as the company expands, the culture becomes more and more diluted and you get different versions of that culture. And the team will have its own culture because you said very well, from different backgrounds, multicultural, multi-generational, and so on, is how do you build that culture together? How do you build those ways of working and those principles, those norms together? And that's what successful teams take the time to build that, to identify it, and to build on it. And they create that space by doing so because they are recognizing and respecting the individuality of each team member. And building what I call a nice fruit salad that becomes homogeneous, they then have those foundations to be able to work on different projects, but also to be able to manage stress. Because there's a very good saying in French that says, try to hide your natural side under stress. It comes back very quickly. Stress is often seen as negative, but actually stress can be very positive if it's taken with positive intent. And that links back to your other point about people always think that people are coming from a negative angle. And that's, again, the fact that sometimes it's just cultural misunderstanding.
Very well said. Very well said. So, if we take, let's say, one of the listeners here, he or she has just been hired into a new company and they are taking over a team. It may be a global team, it may be a local team. Or it could be another listener who is being, she or he is being technically expert at what they are doing, and they're moving from a technical role to a managerial role. And so they're thinking, okay, how do I coalesce this team? How do I create cohesion? You were speaking, Vindou, earlier about building the foundation, settling down to certain norms. If we got a little more into the weeds, how does that look? I mean, if we're going to build the foundation, you know, you have 25 years in global roles across multiple industries. From your experience, what does that look like, building the foundation? I mean, what is that brick by brick? I mean, how can one of our listeners think, okay, you know, this Vindou woman, she's got a lot of professional experience, she's making a lot of sense, but how do I do it? How do we move from the headlines down into the article here?
So I would say there are multiple ways. The one way that I've seen, which is very efficient, is the new leader. Whatever situation, context this person is coming to the organ into this position, the new leader takes time out after having met each and every team member individually, takes time out to meet them as a group and build the foundations by understanding each other's expectations. So just asking the team members, what are you expecting of me as a leader? Why? And also, what do me as a leader expect of you? We take this often for granted that it's obvious. I'm your leader. You know what I expect of you. Well, no, not really, because we know what we think. We already think that we know what the company expects of us. We think we know what the organization expects of us as a job. And now there's a third assumption coming in saying we think we know what our leader expects. Sometimes it's the untold messages which is the most, problematic. Because all expectations and assumptions, actually not expectations, assumptions that we think we know, but it has never been said. And so it's taking that time out. It's half a day, just taking that half a day out and saying, let's work as a team and lay down the expectations of each other. I'll do back the analogy to a marriage. Why am I saying that? You spend more time at work and with your team members than with your own spouse and family. You see, when someone looks at the hours, you'll be spending between 4 to 5 hours per day in the week with your family. So on average, 8, 10, 12 hours, I would say 10 to 12 hours with the team members per day in the week. I'm not talking about the weekends. So already when you're spending just 4 or 5 hours with your spouse or your partner, you have taken time before to say, these are the expectations of each other. That's the same exercise to be done with your team, to say, me as a leader, this is what I expect. Now, explain to me what you expect of me. Why can this dialogue not happen? Because then that's the moment where you sort of at least remove a lot of misconceptions, misunderstandings.
I think that's a very wise thing, what you're saying, and very astute. So what I'm hearing, if a manager, he or she's just taken the role, they've got a new team, it's a diverse team, what have you. What I hear you're saying is initially that manager, he or she should sit down with each of the individuals and talk to them, get to know them for whatever, 2 or 3 hours, half a day. And then also on top of that, sometime within the first couple of weeks or 3 weeks, it's to sit down as a group, both and to talk about expectations, what expectations I have of you and why I have those expectations so they understand the reasons. But at the same time, maybe to begin with, is like, okay, Vindou, as your manager, what do you expect of me and why do you expect that of me? Or what would you like from me, right? And so we move from assumptions or sort of mind reading into concrete, factual expectations. And those expectations may evolve. More likely, they will evolve as the relationship strengthens and progresses. Is that what I understand?
Yeah, not only as the relationship progresses, but also as the job becomes more complex, those expectations will evolve. So it's something to be done on a regular basis. Yes, you're spot on. The other element is also to take time to define the ways of working, the ways of communicating. You mentioned the fact that it's a diverse team. And diversity, I just want to clarify, for me, diversity is not only about gender, it's about nationalities, it's about backgrounds. We can be from the same nationality, but coming from different education backgrounds and so on. The fact that you already had two people in the room, there's diversity. Forget all the other criteria, it's just two people in the room is a diversity. And when you're talking of diversity, if I expand it to culture, taking time to define what do we mean by some key words. So if we define another exercise that I do a lot is what I call the team culture, the team contract, and some other people call it the team culture norms, and so there are different names. So I call it a team contract, and it's a engagement contract to say these are the values by which we want to work together as a team, values and behaviors. So, for example, when you have someone from the south of Europe who's very bubbly, very passionate, who speaks with their hands, and who may have a loud voice, for someone coming from the north or even from Switzerland, where I'm based and I've been living for 30 plus years, someone who's loud, they can think you're shouting and you're angry and saying, well, no, that's just my way of communicating. And it's clarifying those sources of potential misunderstanding and saying it's okay for the person who's coming from Spain or from south of France to be loud and bubbly. That's fine because I understand it's a culture, you know? And so it's addressing those elements that can avoid a lot of other issues. I'll give you a very concrete example. 2 years ago, I found myself in a situation where a professional wanted to put a complaint against a manager because a manager at the end of a meeting had just said, why am I in this meeting? I don't understand my role in this meeting. How useful is it for me? And the professional who was facilitating the meeting felt insulted and felt offended and came to me and said, can I put a complaint? And I said, okay, can I just understand what happened and explain to me the background? And when the person explained to me and gave me the context, I was suspecting, without asking names, I was suspecting who was the leader who had reacted. I said, is this person French? She said, so the lady said, yes, he's French. I said, okay. I said, that may not have been offending. I said, before you do anything official, maybe just have a discussion with him, with the leader, and try to understand why they reacted that way. What was the source? I said, it could be just cultural. It could just be a cultural misunderstanding that it was a way that being French, it's normal for them to express the frustration. Doesn't mean that they're being offending. And the person being English, they are not used to that expression, so they took it as a negative. And that clarified the situation. We got them to speak. It clarified. It led that we did a cultural sensitivity workshop just to understand some of the most common biases that we may have on cultures and to clarify that there. So I'm a bit diverted, but just to tell you, when you're talking of team dynamics, there's so many factors and elements to look into. And when you speak, it comes back to communication, but not taking it for granted that even though we speak English, we're using one word with the same meaning and understanding in mind, or even for the tone of the voice.
Again, I think that's a very salient point. I remember I was working between a Japanese crew and Americans who owned this vessel, and the Japanese were renting the vessel from the Americans. And I'm Canadian myself, so we have the same sort of tendencies as Americans, where we can be quite direct and we speak our point and table all issues. And I remember sitting there in the room as the consultant per se, trying to facilitate this understanding. The Japanese, they were much more of a collective, right? It had to go up the hierarchy. They couldn't commit to anything. And again, there's nothing right or wrong with the North Americans nor the Japanese, but it took time to build this, and it wasn't a one-off. It came down to several. It was an iterative process, I guess. Maybe it was an evolution of communication to find these foundations or norms, or what did you call it? A team contract, right, between these two. So the reason I wanted to share that example with you is that a lot of managers may think, okay, as Vindou, she's got 25 years of experience across the globe. And so what she's saying is, I need to sit down with each of my people, understand their expectations, and then move it to a group setting and such. But what I hear you're saying, and from my own anecdotal experience, that this is not a one-off, that this is a conversation that we will want to have this conversation quite often. It's not so much how we do the business, but how we communicate as a team. Is this what I understand? I was wondering if you can riff on that or expand on that for me, Vindou.
Yes, spot on, Jason. Your understanding is correct. I mean, to say, when you think of it, doing business is pretty simple. We all want to win. Let me say, I always go with the approach, everybody wants to win, is how do you find a win-win? But then the question is how you define the win-win for each side of the parties, of the stakeholders. And so it's already sitting down around the table and saying, okay, what do we mean? What is our intention? What is our drivers? And so it comes back, when you're talking of team dynamics, it comes back to the same point of it's an ongoing conversation. And having that safe zone or that confidence or that capacity of taking a step back, saying, okay, before I react to what a person is saying, let me try to understand from where they are coming. So it's also about the element of showing empathy, but maybe not without using the word empathy, is about using the word of curiosity, understanding. Curiosity and understanding of saying, whom am I talking to? What's their drivers? What's the motivations, and why they're reacting like that? So you're spot on. It's an ongoing conversation. We tend to sometimes overreact, and you had a fantastic post. Post on that, on the overreaction, rumination, and so on. Yeah. It's exactly that. We tend to overreact, and very quickly, because we are so much stressed by time. We always want to go fast. But reality, we just need to slow down and say, okay, step back. What's going on?
Yeah, and I think what you're saying before, when you're talking about sort of, let's just for a Northern European and a Southern European, where the Southern European may be much more vocal, much more, using much more mannerism, such, where the Northern European may be more stoic or more quiet in the way. And there's nothing wrong with either. It's just different ways of cultural communication. So, but what I hear is that maybe, again, this is from my own experience, where they may have a conflict, if we can just say the Northern and the Southern Europeans, and they're on the same team, they're having some conflict, and it comes down to the example you brought up. What I find a lot of the times is that sometimes in that conflict, it's probably best just to kind of walk away if we have that, but it's to return to it maybe a week later when it's become what I call a case study, where the emotional baggage or the intensity has lowered down, and we are much more in a buoyant or mindset. And it's like, okay, Jason and Vindou, what actually happened? How can, maybe not ask why, but what is the reason, Jason, you acted the way you did? What is the cultural norms? Is this also a very good technique to kind of use from your experience?
It's a very good technique because it shows curiosity and interest. Interest, understanding, and curiosity. Having said that, you have to be careful, or you have to be cautious how you position it so that the person doesn't feel that they're being pinpointed to and they're being victimized. Not victimized, but feel as if they're being guilty, So people, it goes back again to personality, culture, education. People don't always like to sort of be reminded of something that went wrong. And they try to sort of avoid it, and what I call play the ostrich. We dug the head in the sand, and we forget it, and we hope that it goes over the head, and may just become bigger. So I love the approach that you're suggesting of saying we should address the problem, because like this we can learn from it and move forward. It really shows a growth mindset, and I would say mind shift also, and so forth. But it's not always an easy one, and goes back to creating that environment where people feel comfortable saying, yes, there was a mess up. Yes, there was a misunderstanding. And this is the reason. And it's fine. I always say, the difference between robots and humans is that humans make mistakes, but they learn from it. Robots are so perfect that for me, it becomes almost boring because there's nothing to learn from, But I would say that's the beauty of being humans, is that we keep on learning and we keep on progressing and we impact each other.
I think circling back to what you're talking at the sort of the trailhead of this conversation about building the foundation, the team norms or the team contract, this just shows how sometimes nuanced these standards may be from team to team, where it's like, guys, we come from a bunch of different cultures. And sometimes we're going to get into conflict. And one of the things I'd like to establish as a standard for us as a team norm is that a week later or a few days later, after we've had a conflict or a blowout of something, that we try to understand the drivers behind why Jason acted, or Jane or John or Yannicka or whoever acted this way, so we can understand. Because I think that's why I think it's so fascinating, because these team norms could be so nuanced. They could be so bespoke depending upon the team, the industry, the department.
Yes.
And it's having these conversations, and it sounds like from your experience that this evolution may find much more refined or bespoke or tailored ways of creating these norms. It doesn't have to be a dozen or 20 of these standards. They may only be a handful, like band of the hand, 5 fingers, 5 rules that we may come back to.
Exactly. And you're spot on, Jason. Think of it also as AI is coming in. It becomes even more and more important to have what we call a soft skills element really focused on. That's what we'll be looking at. And so having those team norms becomes even more crucial. I have the word crucial coming, because people are scared of AI. Reality is it's a partnership. But if you don't have those team norms set to secure the team members, to make them feel confident and safe, it creates other frustrations and other tensions in other parts of the business. So it's really, to your point, it's important to have those open conversations, to understand each other and to be able to just address them.
In the first half of the conversation, Vindou highlighted how team dynamics are often underestimated, even though they are fundamental to an organization's success. She emphasized the importance of understanding each team's members' values, preferences, and dislikes. By creating a safe space for team members to speak openly and authentically, teams can unlock better communication, collaboration, and cooperation. We also explored how effective communication starts with clarity. Vindou shared that new leaders should take time early in their tenure to clarify assumptions and expectations. Now, what's important to underscore that this is not a one-time deal, one-time process. It's an iterative process, because there should be an ongoing effort as teams and challenges evolve. For leaders and managers, the key is to ensure everyone understands their role and has the space to voice their concerns and needs. And on the topic of addressing cultural misunderstandings, we discussed the value of approaching these situations with curiosity and openness, and understanding that everyone around that table has positive intent. Whether it's working through direct conversations or multicultural sensitivity workshops, leaders can help their teams navigate these nuances with greater understanding and more empathy. And finally, we talked about how trust and psychological safety create the conditions for a thriving, resilient team. Vindou suggested that leaders need to remain present and attentive, picking up on the subtle signals that may indicate deeper issues. Trust is built through consistent, open communication and a willingness to listen without judgment. So with that said, let's slip into the stream, part 2 of my conversation with Vindou Duc.
And it's not even a question, we spoke about cultures. I raised a point about the North and the South, but it can be as simple as extroverts and introverts in the same team. Same team, extrovert and introvert. Introvert will not speak up, will keep quiet, will close up. They need time to reflect. It's not they don't agree, they just need time to reflect and process things. Extroverts are very quick and they move and they do this and they do that. And it can create frustrations. I would not say misunderstandings, I say it can create frustrations.
Just to challenge you. So a new manager, he or she comes in, they've got a team, and a major thing here is the ability to establish trust, but above and beyond the basic human respect that we should have for each other in the professional environment, Vindou, my new manager, I'm thinking, okay, I don't really know this woman. I've heard a lot of good things about her, but I really don't know what she's like. I will tap the brakes. I will give you the respect as my leader, as my boss. But if someone's coming into that, they said, okay, I have trust and creativity. But what happens if these new employees that are reporting me, these new direct reports I have, they just don't open up? Or some of them do, but some of these other people, they're just so tight-lipped, they're so closed, they seem so stoic. I can't even read their body language or their facial features. What is your recommendation to help those managers who really want to establish this trust, who wants to establish this authentic psychological safety, but that's what they're confronted with?
The first question I have is to understand from which context are these employees coming from? What was the history? What happened in the past for them to close up like that? What are the rumors they have heard? They may have heard positive things from who? What have they heard from other people? It's trying to understand what has influenced that behavior. Naturally, human beings will not be closed up. Naturally, human beings are always welcoming. If they close up, that means that something has influenced something somewhere. And it's trying to understand what has been that influence. So it's going back to the root cause. Say you said they close up, they're tight-lipped, the body doesn't show anything. It's my advice to the managers is to say, keep your eyes open, because at one point, somewhere, somehow, something will crack off. And you'll have a signal, but it's being attentive to that signal. So it's being very present in the moment when you're in the meetings. One of the downfalls, and I've had it as a manager, so I raise my hand and say, I've had it, is that so the difference is we hear what people say, but we are not listening because we're already thinking of the answer to the potential question that they're going to ask us. And if we are just in the present moment and we are not trying to anticipate what we should answer, we get so much more information because the answer is in the question 95% of the time or 90% of the time. So it's my advice to these new managers saying, if you have team members who are closed up, tight-lipped, to reuse your expression, try to understand what happened before. What generated such a reaction? Something must have generated it. What is it? What's the root cause? And then the answer is there.
I think that's, again, a very salient point. And at the same time, that person who's curious and who has the patience to wait to see that something eventually will reveal itself to get into it. Because to ask a direct or maybe even an indirect question may not be appropriate at that point. Time or temporal distance might have to transpire. Yeah. But there are going to be, and I think this is many managers, both male and female, when they feel that someone's kind of stoic or tight-lipped or what have you, what happens is all of a sudden self-doubt. It's that leader, okay, it must be something about me. Always we spin these sort of negativity bias. It's about self-doubt. And so what you're talking about, I hear, is from someone who is comfortable in their skin, who has the confidence to based on experience. But for a new leader, regardless of age, he or she's coming in and they're trying to employ and to attribute all the skills that you've talked about, but they're thinking, no, it's got to be me. It's something about me. It's a self-doubt. How does someone find the self-leadership? How does someone find the certainty and confidence to kind of try to override those self-doubts, which are usually based on nothing, actually?
Yeah. So there's no one answer fits all. I would say here that it's more a question of I'll also go back to understanding. So I hear you about the self-doubt because it's true. If you have tried multiple things and the person is still it's not showing any signs of opening up and being warm and welcoming or whatsoever, then yes, automatically you get self-doubt, you get self-questionings and all. The simplest thing is just to go up to that person and say, okay, have I done something? Is there something I need to know? Is there something I need to understand? Because it could be a question of communication that they may have said, I don't know, hello, and the person is not used to a hello. Oh, no, I'll give you a very concrete example. A couple of years ago, or not, more than a couple of years ago, I was facilitating a cultural workshop and multicultural workshop in I would say on the German part of Switzerland, and happened to be that you had Americans and Swiss people in the room. And the Americans were saying, the Swiss never say good morning. And the Swiss people reacted. They said, oh, and they were all working together. And one of the Swiss people, lady she was quite senior in age and senior in position. She reacted. She says, no, let's get things clear. We tell you good morning in the lift. You don't answer. So now we said, okay, Americans don't know how to say good morning, so we don't say good morning. She says, no, we say good morning, but you don't answer. The Americans were so shocked that then the person he explained that actually in New York, people are not used to speaking in public places because of whatever context. And that's the reason they don't answer good morning in the lift. It was that simple of an issue that created quite a conversation during that workshop. So to the point, I'm coming back to your point, is taking that, I'm going to use the word courage for the new manager to step up and to step out and say, go and understand what's going on. And yes, the self-doubt is okay. It's going to happen. It happens with everybody. But if you see that self-doubt starting, well, don't let it go too deep. Take that step back as a manager and speak to the person concerned directly and say, what's going on? Without saying, have I done something to offend? Because you still have a position of a manager, but say, okay, what's going on? Something is going on because you're not connecting what's going on. What am I missing?
Coming back again to building norms, which can be very bespoke and very sort of, very, very specific to department. One of the things that I've always found that new managers, regardless of age, can establish with their team is creating a feedback culture. Now, I'd say 90% of the managers I work with out there, and I ask them, how often, above and beyond a performance appraisal, do you ask for feedback from your people? A lot of them, it's like crickets. There's nothing. They don't hear anything. They haven't even thought about it, right? It's always, I'm the manager, I have to give them feedback so they improve. I'm here to support them. Well, I think one of the most important things is the ability to have, a feedback culture that goes both ways. So it's not a monologue, it's a dialogue. And I've always found if you can establish that from the get-go, when you were talking about setting expectations, not assumptions of what expected, but you have a hard conversation about what those expectations are and why. Well, part of it for that team culture might be, guys, every third month or every second month or every what have you, every so many one-to-ones, I want to hear what I can do to improve. And so a lot of the times there's 6 questions I kind of encourage. Now they're just generic questions, but they're based on 3 sets. One could be, what am I doing well? And then the second one would, what can I do to either continue or improve what I'm doing? Or, the second one is, what could I do better? And the second question to that follow up with, okay, what can I either change or eliminate to make those improvements? And a third set of questions is, what can I do more of, or what can I do less of to help you? And what I've always found is not just to drop that on in a one-to-one, give them a few days to process and just lay on the expectation, guys, I'm here to help you. Please, I'd like to have an answer for each one of these because I'm not far from a perfect manager. And by doing this, the first couple of times is a little awkward, especially if it's new direct reports to the manager. They don't know how they're going to react. There's this trust issue again, right? Sometimes.
Exactly.
But over time, it becomes embedded in the culture. And I've found time and time, regardless of organizations, it is one of the strengths of that team culture when they can embed such practices into their whatever monthly or weekly meetings.
I love what you're saying about the feedback. I want to expand on it by talking feed forward. The problem is one of the reasons people are feeling very uncomfortable to speak about feedback is you are going back in the past and you're sort of pinpointing to the person, this is what you did wrong, this is what you blah, blah. Versus when you're going feed forward, it goes exactly in line with the questions, with the 6 questions you have, is you're saying, how can I build the future in a better way? How can I improve? How can I progress? How can we as a team progress? What can we do differently to support and grow and innovate? So the beauty of the whole concept of feed forward is saying is how do we learn from the past so that today we prepare the future? You know? And that's so spot on. And to your point, people take feedback, well, 2 things. There are 2 approaches. One, people take feedback for granted. Although we say
what do you mean by that?
That means that they take it for granted. They say, well, if it doesn't go well, because it's got such a negative connotation,
okay,
that I would say they take it. When I say they take it for granted, they say if it's not going to go well, the people will tell us. If everything goes right, there's no comment, so everything's okay. So that's what I mean by taking it for granted. So they don't give it that same importance that you would give to an exchange, a conversation, or dismantling a misunderstanding. That's one thing. The other thing, and I said it, is that feedback has got that negative connotation, and people link feedback to an HR process when actually it's a business process. So there's also that negative element in it. So unfortunately, it's been almost overused, but not properly, but the value of it has not always been understood or well communicated. And that's the question of feedback. And that's why since a couple of years, I would say since 5-6 years, we hear the concept of feed forward saying, okay, we can't change the past, but we can improve the future. And we can do it by starting now. So it's how do you build on the future, today on the future, for the future, you know?
And maybe that's what needs to be operationally defined, again, specific to each team, but operationally defined, whatever term we want to use, you know, feedback, feed forward, looping, what have you. But what does that term mean for us?
Exactly.
We're giving, just to use the overused term, just for argument's sake, feedback. How do we operationally define that? What is that going to mean for us, right? Does it? Now, I think that's a very important point. So when you're establishing expectations, maybe it's to operationally define specific terms so it doesn't get lost in translation. Is that what I hear?
Yes, exactly. It's exactly that. I mean to say I did a similar exercise a couple of weeks ago with a team. They all spoke French. And we did the exercise of defining the word listening and hearing. And it was so funny. I had 3 different definitions for 2 words for the same language. And then I just asked the origins, and I had 5 different Francophone origins. And I said, it's interesting. And it went to the point that they went to the dictionaries to really define what it meant. I said, no, for this team, what does it mean? I don't want to know the dictionary definition. It's for this team. You have to come to an agreement in this team. And it's okay that's opposite to the dictionary. I have no problem with that. It's yours. It's not the team. It's not the dictionary. It's not the encyclopedia. It's yours. But it was a very interesting conversation. So yes, to your point, it's really defining the words and what do we mean by the words.
So talking about those 5 different Francophones or what have you, what did they say listening was for them? What was the commonality, the agreement that they came to, if you can recall?
So for them, listening means, okay, the difference between hearing and listening, and apologies if I have the confusion in English, for them was that hearing was, so hearing would be écouter. That means hearing, you are hearing the words. Listening, you are integrating the words, and you are really, how do you say, dissecting them. That means it's not only about hearing what you said, it's about understanding. There you go. That's what I was looking for. Understanding what has been said. No? And that's a different step. It goes back to what I was saying before, saying often we are listening to each other, but the brain is already thinking of what the answer is going to be.
Yeah, and I'd like to address that because that's something I learned in my clinical psychology, cognitive science days when we were, going into be working with trauma and such. And one of the things, it's just that automatically the brain will come up with some sort of rebuttal or the next question or what I want to say. And truly, we don't listen. And so there was a technique we learned, and that it's just integrated into what I do now automatically, is echoing. And basically what that is, Vindou, is that if you said something to me that listening is this, I would actually echo those same words in my brain, because since the brain can only focus on one thing at a time, I'm actually hearing the words on repeat. You say it, but then I'm also repeating those words in my head. So there's a deeper sense of understanding or comprehension. And if, for example, if you say something and I'll say, oh, can you just rewind? What do you specifically mean by that? Right? Or I might paraphrase. So what I hear you're saying, Vindou, is this, this, this. And you'll say, yes. Okay. We got an understanding. Or no. What I meant to say was this. So I just wanted echoing for me was always a way for me to stay present and grounded. So I'm truly, as you're saying, listening. And I've always learned the questioning was always valuable, but it's the quality of those questions, because sometimes unintentionally, we may ask questions such as why, like asking a person to justify when we actually mean, can you explain? What is the reason? Or we'll ask loaded questions that kind of trying to force the other person to see our opinion. What I've always found listening is I use echoing, but for questioning, I use something called TED. And TED was tell, explain, describe. So I might say to you, Vindou, I said, can you explain a little more about your thinking behind that? Could you elaborate or describe? Because they were very neutral ways for me to ask good questions to understand their drivers and their motivations. But using echoing allowed me to stay present and really try to comprehend, to be cognizant of what they were saying.
Yeah, exactly. To your point about cognizant and comprehending what they're saying and how they're communicating is really key. And having these techniques like TED, or you mentioned echoing, for me would be paraphrasing, which are similar, or how to say partner systems and techniques, complementary, are very important techniques in our communication. And actually, one thing I tell to my teams when I'm coaching them and working with them, I say, paraphrasing gives you time to reflect on what the person is saying, but also on what you want to say. So I said, paraphrasing is not just being a parrot and repeating. It's actually you have to reflect, and you're already starting to prepare your response. So it's giving you that time, that additional time that you need to think about it.
Well said.
And people don't realize it, especially the introverts. I say, but sometimes just paraphrase. It's okay. It gives you 3 seconds more to think about it.
All these techniques, when we're in a calm, collected, buoyant mindset or mind state, they're like almost a given. Of course. But the thing is, when we are emotionally engaged in some sort of conflict or dialogue or debate, these can go out the window. And so when people characterize these as soft skills, for me, and what I've learned, they're some of the hardest skills. I actually call them hard skills because it takes practice, right? It's like self-defense. If you're going to learn karate or taekwondo or what have you, you just don't read a book. You have to practice it over and over. So when you are in that dire straits, you're able to reflexively use that self-defense. But I think, these hard skills are also a type of verbal karate. There are verbal defense things to, not to go to attack, but to understand diplomacy. But it takes practice time and time again. At least that's my perspective of things.
And you're so correct, Jason. I like the fact that you're putting them under hard skills, because it's hard skills because not only even how much we may master them, we are all emotional people. And when emotions take over, man, we can lose everything. So it's how do we ourselves master ourselves. But then the other complexity we are underestimating is being a virtual world. Since COVID, so many things are virtual and distance. And it becomes even more complex. When you're in the same room, it's okay because you have not only the voice that helps you, but you have the physical, you have the body language, you have so many cues that help you understand what's going on. But when you're doing everything virtual, virtual or remote, it becomes even harder because you're only working with the voice. If that's when the camera is off, if you're lucky that the camera is on, it's okay.
Yeah,
you have some, you're lucky you have more information, but when you're only working with the voice, it becomes even harder to sort of detect what's happening and what's going on. And it becomes even more of a pressure on the person who's managing the situation and who's got to handle it. And so, yes, it's hard skills. You're spot on. And you may have as much practice as you want. You have to accept that mistakes will happen. And that's where vulnerability and trust becomes very important. It's okay to be, people have to accept it's okay to be vulnerable, to say, okay, you know what, I messed up. Not to say something else, I messed up. I'm sorry. And that's one of the problems that we have in the organizations. People struggle to say, I'm sorry, because they see it as a weakness. But saying sorry or saying, I don't know, it's just two different things. I grant you that. It's not a weakness, it's a strength, because you're recognizing something which is that you're not mastering. It's okay. And that's also one of the, complexities and evolutions that I'm seeing happening, is that the new generation, when I'm talking of multi-generationals, is saying, tell us the truth, tell us it's okay. You don't know, because we know this. But the previous generations, I would say our generation or the generation before, have been brought up by saying, you cannot say, I'm sorry, you cannot say you don't know, you have to know everything. But today, in today's world, it's mission impossible. The internet is way faster than us, you know?
Yeah, I mean, how egotistical is that if you think you know everything, right?
Exactly.
Some self-reflection is needed there, buddy.
Yeah, exactly.
So our time is running down. If we come back to, I just like to come back to a point you made. Let's say someone's taken over a virtual team. You know, they're spread globally or whatever across the country. What are some tips you would give them to create better team cohesion if Zoom or Teams is their go-to tool when it comes to meeting with their people?
If the only option of meeting the people is Zoom, Teams, or any other tool, I would say, one, definitely have team meetings. Don't have 3 hours meetings, because those are way too long. People's focus drops. I mean, say we all know the 45 minutes concentration span is there. There's a reason why we do lectures and all on 45 minutes. So that's one, have regular team meetings structured on 45 minutes. And then the second one is have regular one-on-ones with all the team members. And even if it's for 10 minutes, it's fine, every second week, but give them that access to meet and to be able to talk. And don't always have those conversations about the objectives, the goals, or work. Try to get interested in each other's life. Try to understand what's happening in their life, especially when it's at a distance, the time zones and all. The other element about virtual meetings is also the time zones. Have that respect, and I'm using a very strong word, I'm conscious of it, of respect, of the time zone. So don't always ask the person in Australia to have their calls at midnight for them, because it's okay for the rest of the world. Try to have it rotating. It also shows respect for all the other cultures, you know? So it's a question of finding that balance. And that's not always an easy job as a leader or as a manager. It's not always an easy job, but finding that balance. And typically, when you are talking of team norms, that's one of those things that have to be discussed and accepted at the beginning of the relationship.
Brilliant. As we wrap up this conversation, is there one key takeaway that you would like to leave with our listeners when it comes to team resilience, team cohesion?
Team resilience and team cohesion. Don't forget you're working with human beings, and we all have our days. That would be my key takeaway. And it's okay that there'll be some days that will not work out. And that will pass. That should pass. I would say that's a phrase that I love. It's the impermanence of things. So that's my feedback to managers. Allow that people are going to have their moments, and it's not an easy time.
Yeah, so a bad day doesn't represent a bad team or bad leadership. It's just a bad day.
Exactly.
This too shall pass.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Well, Vindou, it's been a very enlightening and engaging conversation. I really appreciate you sharing 25 years of your experience working across different companies and multicultural teams.
Mhm. Thank you so much, Jason. Thank you for having me on your show. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
And it's been a blast.
Thank you.
You know, in my insightful conversation with Vindou, it's not rocket science to build resilient and robust teams. What it takes is us to be present as leaders, to be in the here and now, to be attentive where we are focusing our attention. You know, becoming a new leader or moving into a leadership position where we don't know the direct reports under us, well, for most of us, that can be daunting. There can be a level of self-doubt. And of course, that's natural. Because what is it? We haven't established a track record. They don't know us and we don't know them. And it takes time to build relationships. And one way of establishing that track record of trust and transparency is to begin the first phase of the relationship by listening, by asking questions, by exploring your direct reports, opinions, their viewpoints, sharing their experiences and knowledge, and to also establish from the get-go the rules of expectations, that social contract that we have with our team members, that part of the culture is going to be about feedback, and that feedback is a dialogue and not a monologue, and that you're going to expect feedback from them about how you can improve, what you're doing well, what they need more of or less of. Establishing a culture where people are constantly sharing their expectations, their opinions, and their viewpoints, where they can table issues without worrying about blowback or retribution, well, then you have a strong, resilient, robust team, because things are not cooking under the table. Everything is addressed, whether they're small or big or before they blow up, we can address things. And so resilience and cohesions, well, it's understanding that teams are human, that bad days don't mean bad leadership or a weak team. What it is, it's about, as Vindou said, it's about patience, it's about understanding, it's about adaptability. And each of these help build resilience and maintain cohesion through challenges, through complexities, and through change. Vindou, a personal thank you from me to you for spending some time with me today and sharing your 25 years of experience and knowledge. I found it very valuable and very insightful. So thank you. Well, folks, thank you for showing up for another long-form Monday episode. I will see you Friday with Bite-Sized Fridays. And until then, keep well, keep strong, and we'll speak soon.